I'm Olivia, 34, female. I live with my husband, Liam, and our 2-year-old son, Noah, in a quiet, leafy suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. Our life here is a carefully constructed sanctuary, a peaceful bubble I've worked hard to create as a marketing manager and a mother. It's a life I love, but one that was under constant, silent threat from a force of nature disguised as a Southern grandmother. I thought I knew what our biggest problem was: my mother-in-law's relentless meddling. But I was about to discover the real story was a 40-year-old secret buried in the past, a secret that would give me the power to change everything. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The key turning in the lock was a sound that had become synonymous with dread. It was 10:04 a.m. on a Sunday. Not 10:00 a.m., not 10:05 a.m. Beatrice Hayes operated with a precision that was both admirable and terrifying. Liam was in the backyard, trying to assemble a new swing set for Noah, a task that was producing more muttered curses than progress. I was in the kitchen, covered in flour, attempting to make pancakes from scratch, a rare weekend treat. Noah was happily banging a wooden spoon against a pot on the floor, my little Sue's chef. It was a perfect, messy domestic moment. And then, the click of the lock. Beatrice swept into our home not like a guest, but like a general inspecting her barracks. She didn't knock. She hadn't for years. Liam had given her a key for emergencies only shortly after Noah was born, a decision I had protested with the quiet firmness I'd learned was necessary in our marriage. Liam, ever the peacemaker, had assured me his mother wouldn't abuse the privilege. He was, as he often was when it came to his mother, wrong. "Olivia, darling," she began, her voice a syrupy, sweet drawl that coated every word with implied judgment. Her eyes, a pale, sharp blue, did a swift, sweeping scan of the room. They took in the flour on my cheek, the pile of Noah's toys in the corner, and the smear of banana he'd managed to get on the cabinet door. "Making breakfast, I see. How lovely." The compliment was a ghost, a hollow shape with no substance. What she meant was, it's after 10 and you're still in your pajamas, the house is a mess, and you're only just now feeding your family. "Good morning, Beatrice," I said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "We were just having a lazy morning, you know how it is." "Of course," she said, placing a large, impeccably wrapped gift basket on the one clean spot on the counter. It was filled with organic, sugar-free, gluten-free baby snacks and educational wooden toys that promised to increase cognitive function. It was a Trojan horse of criticism, a beautifully packaged reminder that she believed my choices for Noah, store-bought fruit puffs and colorful plastic blocks, were inferior. I was just at the market and thought of my sweet grandbaby. She moved past me, her perfume a cloud of lavender and disapproval, and swooped down to pick up Noah. "Hello, my precious angel," she cooed, lifting him from the floor. Noah, who adored his bee, giggled and wrapped his chubby arms around her neck. I felt the familiar pang of resentment and guilt. I hated her intrusions, yet my son loved her. It was a conflict that left me constantly off balance. "You've got food on your face, sweetheart," Beatrice said to Noah, pulling a silk handkerchief from her purse to gently wipe his cheek. She glanced at me. "It's so important to keep their skin clean, so sensitive at this age." Liam came in then, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. His face lit up, then immediately tightened into a mask of careful neutrality when he saw his mother. "Mom, what a surprise." "Just dropping something off for Noah," she said, beaming at him. It was a different beam from the one she gave me. Hers for Liam was pure, unfiltered sunshine. Mine was fluorescent, cold, and flickering. "I won't stay long. I know how you cherish your family time." The lie was so audacious it was almost impressive. She had no intention of leaving. This was the opening act, the softening of the beachhead before the main invasion. She'd stay for hours, reorganizing my pantry while claiming she was just helping out, or refolding the laundry because I hadn't done it to her exacting standards. Each act of help was a paper cut to my confidence. a subtle reinforcement of the narrative that I was not a good enough wife, not a good enough mother, not a good enough keeper of her son's home. Today, her target was the pantry. After a brunch where she subtly pushed the organic snacks on Noah and commented on how pancakes were a bit heavy for a toddler's digestive system, she made her move. "Olivia, honey, I was looking for the honey for my tea and I couldn't help but notice things are a little jumbled in your pantry," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "You're a busy working mom, I know. Why don't you let me just straighten up in there? It'll only take a minute." Before I could formulate a polite but firm refusal, she was already on her feet. Liam shot me a look, a silent plea to just let it happen. It was easier. Avoiding a scene with his mother was his primary goal, and my peace of mind was often the acceptable collateral damage. I hated it, but I was tired. The flour was still on my face, the swing set was still in pieces in the yard, and my defenses were down. I retreated to the living room with Noah, trying to tune out the sounds of jars clinking and boxes being shifted. I could hear her muttering under her breath. All this processed food, my goodness. Each sound was a drumbeat of inadequacy. This was our life. A cycle of boundary-stomping visits, passive-aggressive comments, and my slow, simmering resentment. I felt trapped not by malice but by something far more insidious, a love that was weaponized, a care that was conditional. I knew something had to change, but I had no idea how to make it happen. I had no leverage, no power, just a growing sense of desperation. Liam wouldn't stand up to her, not really. He saw it as mom being mom. I saw it as a slow erosion of my own identity in my own home. I sat there, listening to her remake my kitchen in her own image, and felt a profound sense of hopelessness. I didn't know it then, but the key to my liberation wasn't in finding the right words to say to Beatrice. It was hidden away, gathering dust, in a place I hadn't looked in years. The weeks following that particular Sunday intrusion bled into one another, each marked by a fresh wave of Beatrice's influence. It was never a single, dramatic event. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, a campaign of psychological warfare waged with casseroles and helpful advice. Her visits were unpredictable, but her criticisms were not. They followed a reliable pattern. One day, she'd arrive with a mountain of dry-cleaning bags. "Liam's work shirts, darling. I noticed they weren't looking as crisp as they could be, and the dry cleaner I've used for 30 years gives me a discount. It's no trouble at all." The unspoken message, you can't even handle your husband's laundry properly. Another time, it would be about Noah's development. She'd bring over articles printed from obscure parenting blogs. I was reading about the importance of early exposure to classical music for brain development, she'd say, placing a CD of a baby's first Mozart on the coffee table. Radio pop music can be so overstimulating for their little neurons. We'd been listening to a Taylor Swift album. Liam, bless his heart, tried to run interference, but his methods were ineffective. He'd try to distract her, changing the subject with a forced cheerfulness that fooled no one. "Mom, you'll never guess what my firm is doing with the new bridge proposal," he'd say, trying to steer the conversation away from my parenting failures. Beatrice would humor him for a moment before deftly circling back. "That's wonderful, son. A man's work is so important. It's why it's crucial he has a peaceful, well-run home to return to. It allows him to focus." Her eyes would find mine, a silent transfer of meaning. "See? Your chaos is impacting his career." The worst of it happened in public. We met her for lunch at a small bistro in uptown Charlotte. I thought a neutral location might temper her behavior. I was wrong. It only gave her a wider audience. Noah, being a toddler, was having a difficult day. He refused to sit still, throwing his sippy cup on the floor for the 3rd time. I was flustered, trying to clean up spilled water while coaxing him to eat a piece of chicken. Beatrice watched with a look of serene pity. She leaned in, her voice low but carrying. "It's about consistency, Olivia. If you establish firm boundaries at home, that behavior won't happen in public. Children, even at this age, can sense a lack of authority." Heads turned at nearby tables. A woman with a perfectly behaved child in a high chair gave me a sympathetic look. My face burned with humiliation. I felt like a complete failure, a fraud of a mother being exposed under the bright restaurant lights. Liam, mortified, quickly paid the bill and we made a hasty retreat, leaving Beatrice to finish her iced tea in peace, the victor of a battle I didn't even know we were fighting. That night, after Noah was asleep, I tried to talk to Liam. Really talk. "I can't do this anymore, Liam," I said, my voice trembling. We were in the kitchen, the same room where it had all started that Sunday. "I feel like I'm constantly being judged, in my own home, in front of strangers. She's making me feel like I'm a terrible mother." Liam sighed, a deep, weary sound. He was caught in the middle, a place he hated. "I know she's a lot. Roman 4, I know, but she doesn't mean it the way you think. That's just her way of showing she cares." "It's not caring, it's controlling," I snapped, my voice rising. "She's not trying to help me, she's trying to replace me. She wants your life, our life, to be a continuation of hers. Her rules, her standards." "That's not fair," he said defensively. "She loves Noah, she loves you." "She loves the idea of me," I corrected. "The idea of the perfect daughter-in-law she can mold. But I'm not that person, Liam, and I'm tired of pretending I can be." The argument went in circles, as it always did. He would defend her intentions, I would describe the impact of her actions. We would end in an exhausted stalemate, with him promising to talk to her, and me knowing that his talk would be a gentle, non-confrontational conversation that she would expertly bat away. The wounds weren't just from Beatrice anymore. They were from the feeling of being unprotected by my own husband. I knew he loved me, but his fear of upsetting his mother was greater than his willingness to shield me from her. It was a subtle betrayal, but it was chipping away at the foundation of our marriage. I started confiding more in my best friend, Jessica. We met for coffee one afternoon while Noah was at a trial daycare session. "She's a classic matriarchal narcissist," Jessica said, after I recounted the restaurant incident. "She was a teacher and had a layman's grasp of psychology from dealing with dozens of family dynamics. Her identity is wrapped up in being the perfect mother and grandmother. Your independence and your different way of doing things feel like a direct threat to that identity, so she has to undermine you to feel secure." "So what do?" I asked, desperate. "I can't cut her out, she's Noah's grandmother. Liam would never forgive me." "You need leverage," Jessica said, stirring her latte. "Something that shifts the power balance. Right now, she holds all the cards. She has Liam's loyalty, cultural expectations of respecting your elders, and your own exhaustion on her side. You have nothing." Leverage, the word echoed in my mind. What kind of leverage could I possibly have against a woman like Beatrice Hayes? She was a pillar of her former community, a woman whose life appeared to be a flawless tapestry of good breeding and Southern charm. Her past was, as far as I knew, as pristine as her white linen blouses. I went home that day feeling even more hopeless. The whispers of Beatrice's criticism were now a constant chorus in my head. I'd find myself tidying up frantically before she was due to visit, questioning my every parenting choice. Was I giving Noah enough educational stimulation? Was his diet varied enough? Was I a good mother? The wound she had opened was no longer just a surface cut. It was becoming infected with self-doubt. I was losing myself, and I knew that if I didn't find a way to fight back, there wouldn't be much of me left. The search began with something as mundane as nostalgia. Liam's birthday was approaching, and I had the idea to create a photo slideshow for his party. I wanted to include pictures from his childhood, images of a smiling, gap-toothed boy who existed long before the complexities of marriage and motherhood entered his life. I knew Liam's parents had given us several boxes of old photos and mementos when we first moved into our house. They were stored in the attic, a space we rarely entered, a dusty repository of forgotten things. On a Saturday afternoon, while Noah was napping and Liam was at the hardware store, I decided to venture up. The attic was hot and stuffy, smelling of old wood and insulation. Sunlight streamed through a single grimy window, illuminating dancing dust motes. Cardboard boxes were stacked against one wall, labeled in Beatrice's immaculate, looping cursive. Liam school years, Liam college, family holidays. I found the family holidays box and pulled it into the center of the room. Sitting on the dusty floorboards, I lifted the lid. The top layer was a collection of Christmas photos from the 90s. There was Liam in a series of terrible festive sweaters, beaming beside his father, a quiet, gentle man who had passed away a decade ago. Beatrice was in every photo, her hair perfectly coiffed, her smile a constant, unwavering fixture. She looked happy, in control. The perfect wife, the perfect mother. As I dug deeper, I found older albums, the kind with sticky plastic pages and fading, orange-tinted photographs from the 70s and 80s. I was looking for a specific photo Liam had once described, one of him as a baby on his first beach trip. The album I thought it would be in wasn't on top. I sifted through the box, moving aside stacks of loose photos and old greeting cards. My fingers brushed against the corner of something hard at the very bottom. It was a smaller, different kind of album, a simple, leather-bound book with no label. It felt out of place among the festive, family-oriented scrapbooks. Curiosity piqued, I pulled it out. It was heavy, and the brown leather was worn smooth with age. I opened it. The pages weren't filled with photos of Liam. They were older, from a time before he was born. The first few pages showed two young women, teenagers, with the same sharp blue eyes. One was unmistakably a young Beatrice, probably around 16 or 17. Her smile was less practiced, more genuine. The other girl looked strikingly similar, though her expression was softer, a little more rebellious. She had to be Beatrice's sister, Margaret. They were laughing, posing with friends, at what looked like a high school dance, a summer picnic, a graduation. They seemed close, inseparable. I smiled, thinking it was sweet. Beatrice had never once mentioned being this close to her sister. In the present day, their relationship was cordial but distant. Margaret lived a quiet life as a librarian in a small town a few hours away. They saw each other at Christmas and exchanged pleasantries, but there was none of the warmth evident in these old photos. I kept turning the pages, tracing the story of their youth. Then, the photos stopped abruptly. The last picture was of the two sisters standing on a porch, arms around each other. Beatrice looked about 21 or 22. She was wearing a simple dress and looked serene. Margaret stood beside her, a subtle, unreadable tension in her smile. After that photo, there were a dozen empty pages, the black paper stark and unused. But tucked into the back pocket of the album was a small bundle of letters, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. The envelopes were yellowed with age, addressed to Beatrice in a looping, elegant script that I didn't recognize. The postmarks were from 40 years ago. A prickle of unease went through me. This was private. This was her history, her life before Liam, before me. My first instinct was to put it back. It felt like a violation, a step too far. But then I thought of the restaurant, of the endless stream of criticisms, of the feeling of being a stranger in my own home. Jessica's word echoed in the hot, still air of the attic: leverage. My heart pounded in my chest. This was wrong. But was it more wrong than what Beatrice was doing to me, to my family? Was it more wrong than the slow, deliberate dismantling of my confidence? I wrestled with my conscience for a long moment, the dust motes swirling around me like tiny, silent witnesses. With trembling fingers, I untied the ribbon. The knot was stiff, as if it hadn't been touched in decades. I carefully pulled the first letter from its envelope. The paper was thin and fragile, and the ink had faded slightly, but the words were still clear. I started to read, and as I did, the image of Beatrice Hayes, the perfect, unassailable Southern matriarch, began to dissolve. The dust in the attic seemed to settle, and a story I was never meant to know began to unfold, a story of secrets and sorrow that had been locked away for 4 decades. The foundation of her perfect life was not made of stone, as she presented it to the world. It was built on something far more fragile, and I was holding the proof in my hands. The attic air grew thick and heavy as I read. The world outside, Liam at the store, Noah sleeping peacefully in his crib, seemed to fade away, replaced by the faint, spidery handwriting on the brittle paper. The letters were not from a stranger. The signature at the bottom of the first one sent a jolt through me. Yours, Caroline. Caroline, a name I recognized. Not Beatrice's sister, Margaret. Caroline was the name of Beatrice's cousin, a woman who had apparently moved to California in the 70s and fallen out of touch with the family. The official story, the one Beatrice told at holidays with a wave of her hand, was that Caroline was a free spirit who couldn't be tied down. The letters in my hand told a profoundly different story. They were dated over a period of 6 months, 40 years ago. The first one was full of youthful excitement. Dearest B, I still can't believe it. A baby, our baby, I know you're scared, but I'm not. This is a sign, a chance for us to build a real life away from here. My aunt in Asheville said we can stay with her, we can get jobs. It will be hard, but we'll have each other, and we'll have our little one. Please don't listen to your parents. What do they know of love like this? Yours forever, Caroline. My breath caught in my throat. Our baby? I reread the line 3 times. The implications were staggering. I quickly scanned the next letter, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the paper still. This one was more frantic. B, why won't you answer my calls? Your mother said you were unwell. I know what that means. They're trying to keep us apart. They can't do this. I'm coming down there next week. We'll figure this out. Don't let them convince you to do something you'll regret. This is her child, ours. The story pieced itself together with horrifying clarity through the increasingly desperate correspondence. Beatrice Hayes, at 22 years old, had been in a secret, serious relationship with her cousin, Caroline, and she had gotten pregnant. In the deeply conservative South of 40 years ago, this was a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. Her parents, pillars of their small-town community, had intervened. The final letter was shattered, the words stained with what looked like tears. Beatrice, your mother told me. She came to the house and told me what you've done. You gave her away, my daughter, our daughter. You let them send her away to a family who will never know her, who will never love her the way I would. The way we would have. They told me you agreed, that you wanted a clean slate. A normal life. I see now that you were never as strong as I thought. You chose them. You chose their approval, their money, their idea of respectability. You chose it over me, over our baby. I hope your normal life is worth it. I hope it brings you all the joy you've just stolen from me. I am leaving. I'm going somewhere they can't find me, somewhere I don't have to see your face in every crowd. I will never forgive you for this. I will never forgive you for giving away our child. Don't try to find me. Caroline. I sat there on the dusty floor, the letters lying in my lap. The air had been knocked out of my lungs. Beatrice Hayes, the woman who scrutinized my every parenting decision, who held herself up as the gold standard of motherhood, had a secret daughter. A child she had given up to protect her family's reputation and secure a normal life. Suddenly, everything made a terrifying amount of sense. Her obsession with control. Her desperate need for our lives, for Liam's life to be perfect and pristine. Her constant, unending judgment. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about her. Every criticism she had ever leveled at me was a projection of her own profound, 40-year-old inadequacy. When she criticized my housekeeping, she was trying to scrub away the mess of her own past. When she questioned my parenting of Noah, she was haunted by the ghost of the child she had abandoned. Her need to control my motherhood was a desperate attempt to retroactively justify her own choices, to prove to herself that the normal life she had chosen was, in fact, perfect. If she could be the perfect grandmother, it would somehow balance the scales of her being a mother who had walked away. The compassion I felt was brief, immediately swamped by a cold, hard wave of anger. All the pain she had caused me, all the self-doubt she had instilled, all the strain she had put on my marriage, it was all a byproduct of her own secret trauma. She had been wounding me to soothe a wound of her own making. I looked at the leather-bound album and the letters. This wasn't just a secret, it was a source of immense power. The power Jessica said I needed. This knowledge could change everything. It could rebalance the scales, not just for her, but for me. The attic, which had felt like a tomb of forgotten memories, now felt like an armory. I was no longer an unarmed civilian in her psychological war. I had found a weapon. It was a devastating one, capable of causing unimaginable collateral damage. Using it would be a terrible, calculated risk. But for the first time in years, the thought of Beatrice's next visit didn't fill me with dread. It filled me with a steely, quiet resolve. The rules of engagement had just changed. And she had no idea. I packed the album and the letters back into the box, placing it exactly where I had found it. I went downstairs, my mind racing. Noah was beginning to stir in his crib. I washed my face with cold water, looking at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes looked different. The familiar haze of exhaustion and resentment was gone, replaced by a sharp, unnerving clarity. Knowledge, I realized, was a weight. It settled heavily in my gut. For the next few days, I said nothing to anyone, not to Liam and certainly not to Jessica. This was a secret too volatile to share, a weapon too dangerous to even show to an ally. I needed to think to plan. My marketing brain, usually occupied with brand strategies and consumer demographics, kicked into a different gear. I was no longer managing a product, I was managing a crisis. A crisis of my own making, if I chose to detonate it. My first move was to verify. The letters were compelling, but they were only one side of a story. I needed something more concrete. The name Caroline and the story of her moving to California had been mentioned before. I did a deep dive online, searching for a Caroline who would have been in her early 20s 40 years ago, with ties to Beatrice's hometown in rural South Carolina. It was a long shot, but public records and the internet's long memory could sometimes work miracles. I found nothing conclusive. No social media presence, no public records that easily linked back. It was a dead end, which in itself was telling. Caroline had, as she promised in her letter, disappeared. My next step was more subtle. I needed to understand Margaret, Beatrice's sister, the quiet librarian, the other woman in those happy teenage photos. She was the only other living person who might know the truth. I couldn't approach her directly, that would be too suspicious. Instead, I manufactured a reason to talk to her. I called Liam's Aunt Margaret under the pretense of looking for a rare children's book for Noah. As a librarian, it was a plausible request. "Margaret, it's Olivia. I'm so sorry to bother you. I have a strange question." "Olivia, dear, it's no bother at all," she said. Her voice was soft and gentle, a stark contrast to her sister's sharp, authoritative tone. I explained my fabricated search for the book. She was helpful, promising to look into it for me. Then, I pivoted the conversation. "It's so nice to talk to you," I said, infusing my voice with warmth. "We really should get together more often. You know, I was in the attic the other day, looking for old photos for Liam's birthday, and I found this incredible album of you and Beatrice when you were teenagers. You two looked like you were having the best time." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was brief, only a second, but it was laden with something I couldn't quite decipher. Caution, sadness. "Oh, that old thing," she said, her voice a little strained. "Yes, we were very close back then, a lifetime ago." "You seemed inseparable," I pressed gently. "What happened? If you don't mind me asking, it just seems like people drift apart." Another pause, this one was longer. "Life happens, Olivia," she said finally, her voice flat. "People make choices, and they have to live with them. Sometimes those choices affect everyone around them." It was vague, but it was enough. The sadness in her voice confirmed it. She knew. She had watched her sister make a choice that fractured their family, a choice that turned the vibrant, laughing girl in the photographs into the rigid, controlling woman she was today. "Speaking of Beatrice," I continued, my heart pounding, "she's been very involved with Noah lately, very helpful." I chose the word carefully. Margaret let out a short, dry sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "My sister has always had a strong need for things to be a certain way. She doesn't cope well with unpredictability. Never has. She doesn't cope well with a life that isn't the normal, one she paid such a high price for, I thought." The conversation ended soon after, but it had given me what I needed. Margaret's melancholy confirmation was the final piece of the puzzle. The story was real. Now, what to do with it? My first instinct, The vengeful part of me that was so tired and hurt was to confront Beatrice. To throw the letters on her perfectly polished coffee table and watch her perfect world shatter. But my rational mind, the marketing strategist, knew that was a losing move. A direct confrontation would cause a catastrophic explosion. Liam would be devastated, the family would be torn apart, and I would be cast as the villain who brought a 40-year-old secret to light out of spite. Beatrice, cornered, would lash out, and the fallout would be uncontrollable. No, an explosion was messy. I needed a different kind of weapon, not a bomb, but a whisper. Not a public execution, but a quiet, private checkmate. My plan began to form. It was simple, elegant, and ruthless. I wouldn't expose her secret. I wouldn't tell Liam or Margaret or anyone. I would only let one person know that I knew, Beatrice. I wouldn't do it with words. I would do it with a single, symbolic gesture. The power wasn't in the telling of the secret, it was in the threat of the telling. It was in creating a new, unspoken agreement between us. A form of mutual, assured destruction where the only winning move was not to play. I waited. I needed the perfect moment, the next time she started her routine, the next time she came into my home and tried to rearrange my life. I went about my days, taking Noah to the park, working on my marketing campaigns, making dinner with Liam. But underneath it all, I was a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The knowledge I held didn't make me loud or aggressive. It made me quiet. It made me patient. It gave me a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The constant buzz of anxiety was gone, replaced by the low hum of power. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was about to become the author of its next chapter. The opportunity came, as I knew it would, 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday evening. Liam was working late, a project deadline looming. I had just finished putting Noah to bed when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the familiar, dreaded sound of the key in the lock. That, at least, was a minor concession. I opened the door to find Beatrice on the porch, holding a large, insulated bag. She smiled her tight, pleasant smile. "Hello, Olivia. I know Liam is working late, and I thought you shouldn't have to cook for just yourself. I made my lasagna." Her lasagna was legendary, a dish she wielded like both a peace offering and a declaration of superiority. It was delicious, and she knew it. It was another way of saying, "See, I take care of my family, better than you do." "Beatrice, that's thoughtful, but you really didn't have to," I said, my voice even and calm. I held the door open for her. She swept in, placing the heavy dish on the kitchen island. Her eyes immediately began their customary scan. They landed on a small pile of mail on the counter, Noah's finger paintings stuck to the fridge, a pair of my running shoes by the back door. I could see the tiny flicker of disapproval in her gaze, the cogs turning in her mind as she formulated her next piece of helpful advice. "It's no trouble at all," she said, turning back to me. "A home-cooked meal is so important. I worry about you ordering takeout all the time. All that sodium and preservatives." I hadn't ordered takeout all week, but I didn't correct her. I let her talk, letting her build her case against me, letting her walk deeper into the trap I had set. She moved from the kitchen to the living room, running a finger along the top of a bookshelf. She inspected it for dust, a classic Beatrice move. "You know, darling, if you just dedicate 10 minutes every morning to dusting, it never builds up. It's about creating systems." This was it, the familiar lecture, the slow, condescending erosion of my competence. But this time, I didn't feel the usual surge of anger or defensiveness. I felt nothing but a cold, clear focus. "Beatrice," I said, my voice cutting through her monologue. It was quiet, but it held a new firmness that made her stop and turn. "Could you help me with something for a moment?" She looked surprised by the interruption. "Of course, dear, what is it?" "I was doing some organizing in the attic the other day," I began, my heart starting to beat a little faster, a steady, rhythmic drum. "For Liam's birthday. I was looking through old photos." I walked over to the living room credenza. On top, I had placed a single, small, silver picture frame. It was turned face down. Beatrice watched me, her expression a mixture of curiosity and impatience. I found the most interesting things up there, I continued, my voice conversational light. So much family history. It's amazing what gets packed away and forgotten. I picked up the picture frame. I held it in my hands, my back mostly to her, so she couldn't see the image yet. I found this old leather album. It looked like it hadn't been opened in a very long time. I saw her stiffen in my peripheral vision. A subtle, almost imperceptible tightening of her shoulders. It was full of pictures of you and Margaret when you were young, I said, still not looking at her. But the most fascinating part was a collection of letters tucked in the back, tied with a blue ribbon. Silence, the air in the room became thick and heavy. I could feel her gaze burning into my back. I knew in that moment that she understood. The game was over. They were beautiful letters, I said softly. So full of love and hope, and then so much sadness. It must have been a terribly difficult time. I finally turned to face her. Her face was ashen. The mask of serene superiority had shattered, and for the first time I saw the real Beatrice. She looked old, fragile, and terrified. Her blue eyes, usually so sharp and critical, were wide with panic. I didn't need to say the name. I didn't need to mention the baby. The single word, letters, was enough. I held out the picture frame to her. I thought this photo was particularly lovely, I said. She took it from me with a trembling hand. The photo I had placed inside wasn't from the secret album. That would have been too cruel. It was one of the other pictures I'd found. A simple, sweet photo of a teenage Beatrice and Margaret, sitting on a porch swing, laughing, their arms slung around each other, the picture of youthful, uncomplicated sisterly love. The choice was deliberate. It wasn't an accusation. It was a reminder of a time before the secret, before the choices that had hardened her. It was a message: I know the person you were before, and I know the person you became. She stared at the photo, her knuckles white as she gripped the frame. She didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Finally, she looked up at me. Her eyes were swimming with unshed tears. The power dynamic between us had not just shifted, it had inverted completely. She was no longer the general in my home. She was a trespasser, exposed and vulnerable. "The lasagna will get cold," she whispered, her voice a hoarse rasp. It was a desperate grasp for normalcy, in a moment that was anything but. "Beatrice," I said, my voice gentle but unwavering. "I love your son, and I am a good mother to your grandson. My house may not always be perfect, and my methods may not be your methods, but this is our life, and it is a happy one." I let the words hang in the air. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact, an ultimatum delivered in a whisper. She nodded slowly, a single, jerky movement. She couldn't meet my eyes. She looked down at the lasagna on the counter, then back at the frame in her hand. I should go," she stammered. "It's getting late." She placed the picture frame carefully on the end table, as if it were a holy relic. She walked to the door, her movements stiff and uncertain. She didn't say goodbye. She just opened the door and slipped out into the night, leaving her famous lasagna sitting on my counter. I locked the door behind her, leaning my forehead against the cool wood. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. There had been no shouting, no accusations, no grand, dramatic scene. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had just won the war. The quiet chaos I had unleashed was contained entirely within her, and from now on, the peace in my home would be mine. The aftermath was not a sudden, dramatic change, but a slow, quiet dawn. For a week, there was silence. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. The quiet from Beatrice's end was so profound it was almost deafening. The lasagna sat in our fridge, a symbol of the aborted battle. Liam noticed its presence and his mother's absence. "Mom dropped this off?" he asked, looking at it with confusion a few days later. "She didn't even stay to say hi." "She was in a hurry," I said, the lie tasting surprisingly clean. I felt no guilt. It was a necessary part of the new peace accord. "Is everything okay with her?" he pressed, a little worried. She hasn't called. I'm sure she's just busy, I replied, my voice calm. You should give her a call to check in. He did. I overheard his side of the conversation. It was brief. Hey, Mom, yeah, Olivia said you dropped off the lasagna. Thanks so much, oh. Okay, no, everything's fine here, okay, love you too. He hung up, a perplexed look on his face. That was weird, he said to me. She sounded tired, said she was feeling a bit under the weather and was just resting up. Beatrice was not under the weather. She was in retreat. She was processing her defeat, recalibrating her entire understanding of our relationship. She was realizing that the nuclear codes were now in my hands, and I had proven I was willing to at least put my hand on the button. The first real test came the following Sunday. Around 10:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Beatrice. Good morning. I was thinking of Noah. Would it be all right if I came by for a short visit this afternoon, around 3 p.m.? I stared at the message. The words were a revolution. Would it be all right? She was asking for permission, a short visit. She was defining her terms, around 3 p.m. She was proposing a time, not announcing her arrival. This was the new arrangement, the terms of surrender. Of course, I texted back. 3 p.m. would be lovely. We'll look forward to it. When she arrived at precisely 3:00 p.m., she rang the doorbell. When I opened the door, she stood on the porch, waiting to be invited in. She carried a small, simple toy for Noah, a brightly colored plastic ball, not an educational, organic, hand-carved block of sustainable wood. It was just a toy. Her demeanor was transformed. The sharp, critical edge was gone, replaced by a careful, almost timid politeness. She watched me interact with Noah, but her eyes held no judgment. When Noah smeared yogurt on his shirt, she didn't rush for a handkerchief or make a comment about cleanliness. She simply smiled, a small, sad, genuine smile. She stayed for exactly 1 hour. She played with Noah, asked Liam about his work, and spoke to me about my garden. The conversation was light, surface level, and utterly devoid of the passive-aggressive undercurrents that had once defined our every interaction. It was, for the first time, a truly pleasant visit. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. She turned to me, her eyes meeting mine for a moment. In them, I saw a complex cocktail of emotions, resentment, fear, but also a sliver of something that looked like respect. The house looks lovely, Olivia, she said, and for the first time, I believe she meant it. This became our new normal. Beatrice would call or text before visiting. Her visits were shorter, less frequent. Her gifts were simple. Her advice was non-existent. She never again mentioned my housekeeping, my cooking, or my parenting. The silence on those topics was a tacit acknowledgement of my victory. I never told Liam what I had done. He just knew that his mother had mellowed out, as he put it. He was happier, more relaxed. Our marriage, free from the constant strain of her interference, blossomed. Our home was finally, truly ours, a sanctuary. I did, however, tell Jessica. We sat on my back porch one sunny afternoon, watching Noah toddle around the yard, chasing butterflies. I told her the whole story, from the discovery in the attic to the quiet confrontation in the living room. She listened, her eyes wide. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Wow, she breathed. That's a weapon of mass destruction you've got there. I know, I said, but I never have to use it. Just knowing it's there is enough. You didn't just get leverage, Olivia, she said, looking at me with admiration. You took back your life, quietly, brilliantly. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Beatrice. I think about the scared, pregnant 22-year-old girl who made an impossible choice. I think about the 40 years of silent grief and regret that hardened her into the woman I met. There is a part of me that feels a profound sorrow for her, but it's overshadowed by the peace she forced me to fight for. The photo of her and Margaret remains on the credenza. It's a silent, constant reminder of our unspoken treaty. It's a symbol of the fragile peace I engineered, a peace built not on forgiveness or understanding, but on the cold, hard reality of a shared secret. It's not the warm, loving relationship I once dreamed of having with my mother-in-law, but it is, in its own complicated way, a kind of harmony. And in the quiet of my own home, surrounded by the life I've built, that is more than enough. The chaos is still there, I know, locked away inside her, but it is quiet, and it is hers alone to manage.